How's it going, everybody? This is the Nitty Gritty. My name is Chad. With me is Leonard. This is a show about wrestling. And this week we are going to be bringing back an old classic, the down and dirty Nitty Gritty move breakdown, however we titled it back when we last did it. But before we get to that, I will just say that I watched the AEW Revolution show, and I liked it a lot. They only do, a certain number of pay-per-views a year. They don't do one every month. And, in my opinion, they earn every cent when I get them. Certainly not every match was perfect by any stretch, but it had quite a few good matches. CM Punk and MJF was very good. Moxley and Bryan Danielson was also very good. The title match was very good as well. Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, a lot of good stuff to be seen there. And of course, he had William Regal debuting as I assume just in a managerial role at this point, and some guy named Swerve, who I'm not familiar with in any way, but
Isaiah Swerve Scott was Swerve Strickland now, but he was from NXT.
Oh yeah, okay. Why don't I?
And I believe also was on 205 Live as well.
Oh, okay. Well, geez, I feel like I'm totally lost on this guy.
See, new wrestler, and I knew who he was.
Yeah. Hey, there you go. But yeah, it was a good show, and we'll see what happens. Next up is obviously WrestleMania, and we can all look forward to, Pat. I don't know if it's McAfee or McAfee. I don't know how you say his last name, but
I think it's McAfee. But
against Austin Theory, which I don't know. Maybe there are people who are looking forward to that and care. I don't. But at least it's not him and Vince, which is what was rumored. But any thoughts on Austin Theory? And
well, just to mention on my end, I randomly watched a episode of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling from 1982.
Wow, that's
where they were doing a build for a battle royal where the winner got a brand new 1982 Lincoln Continental.
It already sounds more interesting than WrestleMania.
So yes, it probably was, and it had Ricky Steamboat and Jake Roberts as a tag team. That was one of the main reasons I clicked on that when I read that in the description. I was like, oh, I want to see that. Because when you said that you watched that, I was thinking, well, what's the last wrestling I watched? And I was like, oh, it's that episode of Mid-Atlantic for no reason. But I think it's probably way better to do Theory and McAfee than to do Vince. And I know Austin Theory and Vince have been connected lately, and I don't know how much of a rub that's giving Theory. From what I do know of Theory, I think he's a good young talent.
Sure.
And hopefully this might get him a WrestleMania spotlight. It's going to go one of two ways. Either he's going to go over and he's going to look good and it's going to help him, or McAfee's going to beat him and Theory's going to look like a joke. And it's probably going to be that one.
Yeah, I don't think this match does anything really for Austin Theory at all. I mean, I guess it could do something for Pat McAfee, but I don't know. It's like you said, he's a good young talent, but I don't know. Stuff in WWE is kind of all over the place. Dolph Ziggler just won the NXT title, from what I heard, which is just I don't know. That's confusing to me.
You know what? They're just going to hot shot a bunch of stuff heading into WrestleMania because they don't have anything else.
Right. Oh, yeah. And speaking of, that's what I was trying to think of as we were talking here. So the Austin Kevin Owens situation has been announced, and they're doing everything in their power to make people think that it's a match, which it very much isn't. Because if you look on the advertisement, it just says the KO show. So what does that mean? That means that Austin didn't want to do a match, and he's going to come in the ring, trash talk, stun Kevin Owens, go home, have a beer. Or have beers in the ring, most likely.
Have beers in the ring, have beers at home, and probably get a crazy payday for what is basically a walk-on.
Right, and basically him probably not that far of a drive. So
right, yeah.
But yeah, so that is what it is. But yes, moving on to the main topic at hand, which is the down and dirty move breakdown. And this time we are going to do sleeper holds. I believe this idea was sparked from our Brutai episode, right, Leonard?
Yes, but being the sleeper hold was his main, finisher
Who do you
as the
think of when you first hear sleeper hold?
Yeah, I think Bruce Beefcake is, at least for our generation, the first guy you think of.
Yeah.
Although, and two, I think of Roddy Piper.
I was going to say that's the easy interchangeable, I would guess, one and two option there for sure. Now, if you were to say, what do you think of when you think of chokehold? My answer might be a little bit different there. I actually probably have to think about that for a second.
Mine is more I would think of MMA first, like MMA and other forms of legit fighting. One thing that I found interesting about this, because we did kind of throw around, let's do maybe arm bars or leg locks, and there's so many of those.
Yeah.
But I think the difference between that and this is the fact that, sleeper holds and chokes just feel more real and practical. In fact, a lot of the moves that we're talking about, we are going to talk about today are using legitimate fighting sports, not just wrestling, but MMA. If I'm in a bar fight, I'm not going to whip out a sharpshooter on a guy. But I mean,
why the hell not, Leonard?
Yeah, I don't think that's practical. I think you're going to take a pull cue or a chair to the back of the head when you got him down there.
Well, funny you mentioned though. So not a sharpshooter, but many years ago, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
It could be off. There was an MMA fight where a guy finished somebody else by putting him in a Boston Crab. And,
nice.
And it is amazing. If I can find a GIF of that, I'm going to throw it up. The guy does the Boston Crab and gives the thumbs up while he's doing it. It's a legit fight. It's just, but yeah, I wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah. So a rare instance, but if I'm in a bar fight, which happens all the time, sure. If you get behind someone, you could put them in a triangle choke or a sleeper. It's possible if you get a drop on a guy.
Maybe not a Cobra Clutch.
Maybe not a Cobra Clutch. When you start getting into the more elaborate moves. And also something like a leg lock or an arm lock, a guy is still conscious and able to respond. With a sleeper or a choke, I mean, they're out. And when you talk wrestling, you see these in kind of these definitive matches like hair versus hair or mask versus match, because the guy has to be unconscious so he can fulfill the stipulation. And that's one reason why the Barber used the sleeper hold was because, in practicality, a conscious wrestler is not going to let you cut his hair. So he has to be out.
Right. And, just to say, when Leonard mentioned about getting in bar fights, it's very rare that Leonard doesn't go out and get in bar fights. And, when he tries to put somebody in the chokehold, he always does what Brutai does as well, which is the motion to go to sleep. And, that gets a pop.
No, most of the time when I do that, they just run away because they know what's coming.
Yeah. But you have to make them wait till you get your shears out.
Right. But it's a good way to avoid confrontation because they know.
Yeah, especially if you get shears out, then they might think the fight's going in a completely different direction.
Yes.
But about MMA, though, I will say that I think MMA and its rising popularity over the years has done a lot for submission holds in general in pro wrestling, specifically choke holds, because we know, like, the commentators have been forced to call them different things and, describe what they're seeing, and it gives talents more of a catalog of moves to choose from as a part of their repertoire, or even a finisher. And if I would say Samoa Joe would come up first in my head when it comes to a chokehold. That's who I was thinking. Because I think he's popularized it probably the most. But yeah, so we are doing sleeper holds, choke holds, and if this is your first time checking into our move breakdown, we usually have brackets of 4 or 5 moves per bracket. We do a tournament of sorts, and we crown what we call the ultimate version of said move. And I'm just going to say now that in the past, we tend to go with the regular version of the move, the one that you see the most. Mm-hmm. I don't see that happening here. I just don't. Maybe Leonard is going that route, but I am really not necessarily. So we'll see.
We'll see what happens.
And
it should be mentioned, this isn't every choke and sleeper version there is out there.
No.
We kind of went through a list, pick ones that were seemingly widespread or easy to understand. Some of these have 5 or 6 variations, and we're not mentioning all the variations. And we didn't go for things, say, like the Tongan death grip or like the thumb, what is it called, the Asiatic spike, the thumb to the throat, things like that. We didn't go for, even though they're listed as technical chokes.
All right, so let's first read off what is on our first bracket one here, which would be the standard sleeper, the buffalo sleeper / arm hook sleeper, the dragon sleeper, the Cobra Clutch / $1 Million Dream. Now, the standard sleeper doesn't really require any description. You would see people, mostly Bruce Beefcake and Roddy Piper, do that. You see a lot of other people do it as well. It's very rarely used as a finisher these days, just on its own. And, so you will see people pull that out every now and then. But I think, talent these days usually have a wide variety of submissions they go to. But back in the 80s and early 90s, it was certainly regular. The buffalo / arm hook sleeper is a choke that sees the wrestler kneeling behind a seated opponent before grabbing a hold of one of their arms, bending it backwards overhead, and then locking the opponent's wrist into the attacker's armpit. The wrestler then wraps their free arm under the opponent's chin in a sleeper hold, and it puts their other arm through the arch by the opponent's trapped arm and locks their hands. The wrestler will then squeeze the opponent's neck, causing pressure. This move was invented by Hiroshi Tenzan, and this was not one I was very familiar with. But as you'll see with this list, a lot of these moves are close together in description. There might be like one thing that separates them. But yeah, that's one that you might not see or hear about much in America. The Cobra Clutch, obviously we know what the Cobra Clutch is. Sergeant Slaughter did the Cobra Clutch. $1 Million Dream is the same type of move by Ted DiBiase. I did not realize that Jim the Anvil Neidhart did this, and he called it the Anvilizer, which is amazing name that I wish I had known about before this show.
Yeah, I saw that on the list too, and I did not know that. I do not remember it. I wonder if we can find a match with him using it. Or
I'm gonna search it out. I'm gonna search it out.
I do not have any memory of Neidhart using a sleeper.
So this is also called the arm trap half Nelson sleeper, and as I said, you don't need a detailed description there. You see it happen a lot. You then have the Dragon Sleeper, which you would see performed by Ultimo Dragon. Roman Reigns uses a version of this now. You might hear it called the Guillotine Choke as well. But the Undertaker used a standing version of it. Aleister Black, formerly known as, of course, used it. A lot of people use this move. You will see this move performed in MMA a lot because it's really easy to put on and it's effective when you put it on correctly. So yeah, I think I got them all there.
Yes.
But before I give my pick, I'll let Leonard, if you have any thoughts on any of these moves.
No, we talked about the standard sleeper and how that's the basic bread and butter original version of it. And, I think that, like you say, it doesn't get used a lot anymore, but you do see people whip it out from time to time, usually a smaller guy on a bigger guy. I don't want to say Dolph Ziggler is probably the last guy I remember.
He does. Yeah, he does. He pulls that. That's a good call. Absolutely.
Using a sleeper, on a semi-regular basis, like in a big match, he'll use this. Or if he gets a much bigger opponent. The Dragon Sleeper, again, like you, I'm not that familiar with. And no, I'm not the Dragon Sleeper, I meant the Buffalo Sleeper. The Dragon Sleeper is probably one of the first variations outside of the Cobra Clutch that I saw, heard of, got pushed. I think when MMA started to become popular, that was one of the first kind of moves that you saw that felt MMA that were getting used. And it's interesting to note that there was a period where The Undertaker was not only using this, but another sleeper variation that we're going to talk about. And there seemed to be a period where Taker was just watching a crap load of MMA and was
Oh
like,
yeah.
So that's in the future. But if you want to give your pick first, I think you can definitely sway me in this round because there's two that I'm leaning toward.
Well, so I'm with these. I probably am going to lean more towards a reality choice rather than the pro wrestling choice. At least so far, that's kind of what I'm leaning towards. The sleeper hold, the regular sleeper hold to me is not the best version of a chokehold to me anymore. Like certainly it was an 80s thing, but not as much anymore. To me, if I was going to put a chokehold on somebody, it would be the Dragon Sleeper. So that'd probably get my vote here. I love the Cobra Clutch. I love seeing DiBiase and Sergeant Slaughter put that on people, but it's impossible to do that to an actual person that's that's upright and alert. Like you're not gonna do that. And if you have in real life in a real fight, then I want to hear that story. But
send us pictures.
But yeah, I would have to go with the Dragon Sleeper here because it is being used as a finisher today, and it is being used in MMA today very regularly because it's like I said before, it's not hard to put on somebody, and it's very effective if you do it correctly. So.
Well, I was leaning towards the Dragon Sleeper and the Standard Sleeper, which was basically on historical value and nostalgia value. And again, if you talk, hey, wrestling versus real world or other sports and prevalence, the Dragon Sleeper is, something you're going to see more today and is more modern. And this is probably the first time that the standard version of a move that we're talking about doesn't get out of the first round. So
That's true.
Go with the Dragon Sleeper.
All right. Well, bracket 2, Leonard.
Bracket 2's me, and these are more of your choke holds in this bracket. We kind of try to group them as type together. So we have the rear naked choke. Samoa Joe uses this as the Guillotine Clutch. It's basically a mat-based sleeper with body scissors. This is also used in mixed martial arts, so there's a bit of a legitimacy or an increased threat element this one seems to have today. We then have the Guillotine Choke. Again, popular with MMA as well. It's similar to a front chancery, but more of a chokehold than a face lock. Roman Reigns uses this in wrestling now. It can be done in a variety of positions. It involves the opponent bent at the waist and the attacker having the head hooked, and it can also be done with a body scissors as well. Then we have the other Taker move that we mentioned, which is the Goga Palata, if I'm saying that correct, or the Guga Plata, if I'm saying that correctly. He uses Hell's Gate. Tyson Kidd uses a variation called the Heart Lock. It's the legs around the neck and arms around the head while laying on the mat and forcing the opponent into an elevated position. Some of these descriptions I know are going to be hard to picture, but when Chad throws at the picture of it getting used, you'll go, oh, that's what you mean. And then finally in this bracket, we have the Anaconda Vice, most popularly being done now by CM Punk, but it was also created by Tenzin. You're on the mat and you have one arm around the opponent's arm and another around their head. There's variations of this called the Anaconda Max and the Anaconda Cross. I always thought this was a crossface until we did this list, and then reading the description and looking at it more, it does come across as a choke more than what I thought of it just being kind of a crossface. So Chad, your thoughts on these four in this bracket?
Well, I do want to correct myself from earlier. The Dragon Sleeper is like an inverted. You have the person in an inverted kind of face lock. And that's how that chokehold is done. I mentioned Roman Reigns in the Guillotine Choke, which is a little bit different. So.
Oh yes, I think it's a different direction.
So whereas you do see the Dragon Sleeper sometimes in MMA, it's really the Guillotine Choke that I was referring to that you see in MMA more often than not. Okay. But yeah, I see that's the thing. There's slight variations on these moves, but they do mean different things. So yeah, the rear naked choke to me is the one that you really don't want to be in ever, because if somebody gets that on you, it's very hard to get out of it. You really have to be calm. If you watch MMA, you really have to be calm and really know your moves to get out of it. So that's a devastating move. The Guillotine Choke, as I said, with the Dragon Sleeper, it's easy to put on, and you have to do things correctly. But like I said, it's very effective. The Hell's Gate was always a cool, move to see. It's similar to a triangle choke. You just don't really use the leg as much. The Anaconda Vice was CM Punk's like an early finisher for him in the ECW, WWE ECW days. And, that's one that you might see him pull out every now and then. But that was more famous when he had a lot of hair. But, I don't know, Leonard. I'm kind of tossed between two different ones here. So what are your thoughts?
Well, again, all my thoughts, I think, matches yours. The Hell's Gate was always looked cool, but I don't know how practical it is for this. The Anaconda Vice, again, I associate mostly with CM Punk, and I do think he does still use it from time to time. So for me, this probably comes down to the Guillotine Choke and the Rear Naked Choke. We talked a lot about sometimes you associate a move with a wrestler very closely, like the Sleeper and Bruce Beefcake. For here, the Coquina Clutch or Rear Naked Choke with Samoa Joe, I think of that very closely. Since you mixed up the Guillotine Choke and the Dragon Sleeper previously, I'm going to go with the other move here, and I'm going to give my vote to the Rear Naked Choke or Coquina Clutch, especially as Samoa Joe uses it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm leaning towards as well. But to be fair, I still would have voted for the Dragon Sleeper in the previous bracket.
Okay, there you go.
So I wouldn't have changed that. I just did. I forgot slightly how the difference is there. As people tune out of this video, but we know our stuff. So yeah, this would definitely, to me, be between the Guillotine Choke and the Rear Naked Choke. And the fact of the matter is, a Rear Naked Choke can be put on anybody by just about anybody. And you hook the legs, and there's really not much that people can do about it. So I would.
And they teach that. And just to add, they do teach that in self-defense classes and martial arts classes. That's a basic move.
Absolutely. But that was a close one. I would say. So yeah, Rear Naked Choke. Moving on. So that brings us to bracket 3. We have the standard choke, single or double-handed, the double-handed choke lift, the corner foot choke, and the triangle choke. So the standard choke, single or double-handed, is something that you see pretty much every wrestler do at least once, if not more times in a match. Maybe you don't see the double-handed one nearly as much these days, but certainly heels will do this move more. And you have the referee trying to count to 5, or they're disqualified. So you see that all the time. The double-handed choke lift, sometimes that is just what it is, just them, a big guy kind of holding somebody up in a choke, or sometimes it'll be used as a move. Prince Albert, I know, had this as part of his move, but you usually see this with big guys because it's a sign of power, and it shows how much they can do to a little person. So that's usually what you see there. The corner foot choke, you'll see guys utilize this every now and then, but I do feel like this has become more of a female-led move because it shows their flexibility a lot, and
their legs.
Well, yes, of course. And so you'll see people like Dana Brooke and Charlotte do this. Those are the two that come to mind more often than not. The triangle choke, as I mentioned earlier, it's similar to the Hell's Gate, but with the triangle choke, you have the person utilizing the move is on their back, and they'll pull the arm down and utilize their right leg and pull the opponent's neck onto their shin area, basically. And so that's what you have happen there. So, yeah. Leonard, what are your thoughts on these moves?
Well, this bracket is pretty much your simplest, straightforward chokes. The standard choke, I think, is probably too simple to move forward. I am a sucker for the double-handed choke lift. I love that. And again, like you said, it's a way for a big guy to show his power. And I think what really comes out of this is when they're double choke lifting someone and they throw the person like into the corner, or they perform a move out of it like a choke slam or a choke bomb type of thing. So I think that can just look really great and really devastating, even though it's very simple. Now, when you talk about the foot choke in the corner, you actually didn't mention the two people I associate this with. One is Kevin Nash, and the other is Stacy Keibler.
Well, Stacy Keibler, I wouldn't have thought of. I'm glad you mentioned Kevin Nash, though, because absolutely he used that move all the time. And but Stacy Keibler for obvious reasons. But she's not known for her in-ring career. But yes, she did it a lot too.
Yes, because she had the very long legs, and that was her thing. You know, when every other female talent they had was about her boobs, Stacy was about her legs. So they would always try
maybe a little bit more than about her legs. Moving on.
Yes. Anyway, but Nash too. I know the famous line about Kevin Nash is that he has 6 moves and one of them's a hair flip. But the foot choke is definitely on that list. So I think it's something that really draws attention, and it's usually used by taller wrestlers, or like I said, female wrestlers as well. The triangle choke, I know that's another one that CM Punk uses. It's MMA related. This one, is probably the bracket with the simplest moves, and I don't know if I have a clear favorite here. Is there anything that you're leaning toward more so than another?
We should mention that one of the people that performed the triangle choke a lot was Shane McMahon.
Yes,
when he was around. But Shane McMahon is surely going to be all elite soon, right, Leonard?
Right. I think in that long-term fantasy wrestling that I've talked about, where I run a version of Continental Championship Wrestling, I just brought in Shane McMahon as a consultant.
That's the world would catch on fire if Shane McMahon joined another wrestling organization.
Yes, I think it would. I think it'd be awesome though to see, but yeah.
But so this is a very simple version of the move, except for the triangle choke. A lot of these are just simple utilizations of a choke hold.
Yeah.
I like when a big guy does the double-handed choke lift. To me, that is always a spot that draws attention from the crowd, and for good reason. The triangle choke I like a lot. So in this case, I'm certainly willing to go with the double hand choke lift as opposed to the triangle choke. I have been more reality based, but if we're talking about a wrestling move, I mean, how many times have we seen big guys do this? You've seen it all the time, and it always.
Yeah, I think it's more awesome, and I think there's also versatility out of it. Like we talked about, you can throw, you can slam. There's things you can do. So yes, I was leaning towards double-handed choke lift, and if you're cool with that, let's go with that.
Absolutely.
All right. So we got bracket 4, which is mine to go over again. And this is sort of the oddball bracket. These were just kind of some moves that we thought were cool or maybe neat to talk about and didn't really fit anywhere else. So we have the figure 4 neck lock. This is basically doing a figure 4 with your legs, but intertwined around the person's neck, not their leg. There's an arm bar or some trapping of the arms involved in this, or can be involved with this. The Koji Clutch, Sami Zayn used to do this. It's kind of a neck vice while on the map, similar to the Anaconda Vice, but the leg is also roped in there for more pressure against the neck and head. Then we have what is probably the coolest name here, and that's the Spider Twist. It is a head scissors crucifix choke. Naomi uses this as Feel the Glow. To me, this looks and feels a little bit too complicated. You either need your opponent to be really out of it or really helping you to set up. And then you have the straight jacket. While behind the opponent, usually on the mat, use their own arms to cross and choke out their opponent. I always think it's badass when you can use someone's own body against them.
Yeah.
And then neck breakers, we talked about the straight jacket neck breaker, also known as the Regal Cutter, which I really enjoyed. And Jinsei Shinzaki, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, invented this one. So a lot of these coming from Japanese wrestlers, being popularized by Japanese wrestlers. So your thoughts here on the oddball round that were mostly chose just because they had cool names?
Yeah, there's a lot of cool chokeholds here that you probably don't see a lot in mainstream wrestling anymore, but they are some unique versions of this move. The figure four neck lock, you certainly don't see a lot. The spider twist is a cool name. The straight jacket, I feel like you see this less as a chokehold and more as like a move. You were talking about the Regal neck breaker and whatnot.
Yeah.
You know, I know I've seen some females utilize the straight jacket chokehold there, but for me, this is an easy pick. I would have to go with the Koji Clutch here. I would say it's probably the most popular version of the move in this particular bracket, and it looks devastating, as I'm sure you'll see when I put the gifs up. But yeah, it's a cool name, a cool version of the move. I wish more people would do it, but yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I do. Although I love the name Spider Twist, I would agree with you. The Koji Clutch is probably the best one out of this bracket by being the most popular and also maybe the most practical of all of these. So again, not every single choke and sleeper there is out there. These were just 16 prominent ones that we pulled. And now I will throw it back to Chad to go over our final four.
All right, so we have our final four here, our semifinals. So from bracket one, we have the Dragon Sleeper, and it will be going against the Rear Naked Choke from bracket two. And I will just say that since I was slightly mistaken in how this move is utilized, I would go with the Rear Naked Choke here because I think it's still very much vital, both in pro wrestling and in MMA. Shayna Baszler obviously does this a lot. When she's on screen, that is. But yeah, I would definitely say that this is the dominant version of the move. The Dragon Sleeper is really cool to see when you see it, but you mostly see a guillotine version at this point. You don't usually see the Dragon Sleeper as much anymore. But yeah, for me, this is Rear Naked Choke all day.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I do like the Dragon Sleeper, but as you said, I think the Dragon Sleeper was maybe sort of an introduction to MMA type moves in wrestling when that was starting to creep in. And now that we've advanced further, something like the Rear Naked Choke is more devastating, more common, has maybe a stronger visual. And the fact that you've got arguably the top wrestler in the world in Roman Reigns right now using it, I think says a lot for it as well. So yes, I would agree with you, and we will advance the Rear Naked Choke to the finals.
Yeah, and you know, one kind of side note with regard to Roman Reigns using it, it does seem like, you know, when a talent gets to that highest superstar status and they have a repertoire of moves, but that repertoire doesn't include a submission, they usually like will try to give them a submission somehow to use in their move set. People might not remember Brock Lesnar having one of my favorites, which is called the Brock Lock.
Yes.
It's a muffler stretch. That's what it is. But I loved the Brock Lock. I remember some of the matches that he had with it. It just looks, to me, it looks so devastating when somebody puts that on. Like, so I wish he would bring that back. I don't think that's going to happen because he would use the arm bar or the Rear Naked Choke himself or whatever. But yeah, anyway, that's become a dominant move for Roman Reigns these days. So our next two, we have the double-handed choke lift going against the Koji Clutch. Two very different versions of this move. So Leonard, I have a feeling I know what you're leaning towards, but why don't you go ahead?
Well, as much as I do like the double-handed choke lift, I have to admit that when you compare it to a move like the Koji Clutch, the Koji Clutch is more practical. It's more MMA based. We seem to be leaning more towards those you could actually pull out in a fight. So as cool as I do think the double-handed choke lift is, and if you talk pure wrestling, there is versatility there. I think when you compare the two, you have to go with the Koji Clutch, just because it is, I don't know, maybe more of a move, let's say, more of a hold than just picking up a guy and throwing him.
Yeah, no, well said. I mean, the Koji Clutch is a legitimate chokehold, whereas the double-handed choke lift is often used. I mean, they might be choking the person for like a few seconds, but generally they're just picking them up to showcase their power, and then they're throwing them back down or slamming them back down if it's one of your finishing maneuvers. But yeah, so I would go with the Koji Clutch here, Leonard. And I think our winner is pretty clear cut at this point, but maybe not. So we have the Koji Clutch going up against the rear naked choke. So, Leonard, are you going to throw a curveball?
I would assume that you're leaning towards the rear naked choke.
Yeah.
And I am perfectly fine with that. I could make an argument maybe against a couple of the other moves in some of the other brackets, or holds in some of the other brackets, maybe. But against the Koji Clutch, again, as much as we both kind of like the clutch and the way it looks and all that, it is not nearly as well used, and I don't think maybe nearly as practical as what the rear naked choke is.
Right.
What I was talking at the start, what is interesting about these types of holds as opposed to other types of submissions in wrestling is that a lot of these are practical. You could use them in a real fight. You can use them in other sports like MMA. And of all those moves, probably the rear naked choke is the one, as you said, that could be done by most people to most people. So I would, yes, definitely go with that, as much as I would like to argue the Koji Clutch for the sake of doing it. I think that the rear naked choke is definitely the obvious winner here out of this.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I really don't have anything else to add other than what you said about the Koji Clutch. It looks really great, but as you said, it's not really that easy to put on. And if we were having like a true 1 seed versus 2 seed, I don't know. I think maybe the Guillotine Choke would probably be there. It would certainly be in the conversation.
Right. That's what I was thinking when I said what I did. I think the rear naked choke versus the Guillotine Choke might be more of an argument.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let's talk about.
And I would like to say that I like you also messed up, because when I was talking about Roman Reigns a little bit ago, I was thinking the Guillotine Choke, not the rear naked choke, which is of course what Samoa Joe uses, is the Coquina Clutch. So much like you, I kind of got mixed up on what move we were talking about, which is easy to do, I think, during all of this. But again, yeah, if it was rear naked choke versus Guillotine Choke, I think that's a deeper conversation for us. I know if we ever did like a big all the moves against each other, that there might be room for a couple wild cards. And I think the Guillotine Choke could be a submission wild card if we ever do the huge bracket of all of the winners from our move breakdowns.
Yeah. So we kind of quickly mention some of the other choke holds here that really probably wouldn't have advanced in the tournament, even if they were in. You have the Hangman's Choke, which has the wrestler wrapping their arm around the opponent's neck, performing a sleeper hold, then climbs onto the second rope and kind of hangs them there. That's always cool to see.
Yes.
I mean, it's an illegal move in pro wrestling, so you don't, it's not all.
Yeah, that's a move that if you do, you only got like 5, the 5 count, or it could be used in, no DQ matches, things of that nature.
Right. Some of the other ones, one that I don't think I've ever seen before, but I'll have to look it up. The bridging Cobra Clutch, with the opponent lying face down. The wrestler sits beside the opponent, facing the same way, locks on the Cobra Clutch, then arches their legs and back, bending the opponent's torso and neck upwards. It was used by somebody named Delirious. Do you know who Delirious is, Leonard?
Delirious was the booker for Ring of Honor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I forget his real name, but or what name he goes under. But Delirious was the booker of Ring of Honor for the past several years.
Right. Well, you also have a variation of the triangle choke called the pentagram choke, which I'll try to throw a GIF up of. Is there any others that I'm missing, Leonard, that you would like to mention?
No, not really. I know I did mention that there were some oddball ones that were more of a like the Tongan death grip type of thing, which I always thought was cool. Haku used that. I don't know if you can consider the mandible claw that Foley used, because that's not really a choke. It's like a mouth grip.
It's like a pressure point type move.
Yeah, it's a pressure point. It's kind of, Hunter Johnson is Delirious's real name. I was looking that up. I don't know if he goes by that behind the scenes, but.
What about the choke slam? Is there an argument to be made that should be here?
The choke slam?
It's a combination of a chokehold and a slam.
Right. I picture the choke slam as more of, I guess, more slam and less choke.
Yeah.
The neck or the throat is your access point for the lift.
How great would it be if like the Undertaker had the choke on for like 3 minutes? And then decided to go for the slam.
Yeah, if he just had a guy and just lifted him and just held him there.
It just held him there. He probably disqualified after a few seconds.
But. Yes, possibly so. So yeah, I mean there are moves like the choke slam that comes out of a choke, but yeah, you know, and there's some others. Again, when we do these move breakdowns, it's hard to hit everything that counts. And I mean that's one reason why I don't know if we will ever do say like arm bars or leg locks, because there's so many that we would probably have to do a much larger bracket or break it up into two. Two videos type of thing. But who knows? We might do that in the future. Just keep an eye out.
And if Natalia, Natty Neidhart, is watching this show, which obviously she probably is.
Oh yeah.
That she needs to bring back the Anvilizer. Just saying. I really think that could be used. I mean, God, that is such a great name.
Yes, and of course she's done things to honor her father over the years in the ring, and I think it's great that she does that. And I think the Anvil was. I know I've told the Jim the Anvil Neidhart story here on the show before.
Yeah,
where Dan and I wound up hanging out with him in a bar in a show that was completely off the beam that I refer to as the Jim Neidhart incident. No, the Jim Neidhart fiasco is what I call it, which I said if I ever had a band, I would call it the Jim Neidhart fiasco.
That's a good name. That's
good band name. So, but yeah, I mean, I think Jim's underrated. I love Jim Neidhart. I think it's because he was, partnered with Brett, and the Hart Foundation is a great tag team, but there's always like the second guy in the tag team. That was Neidhart. But if you look, he did do stuff singles, and he did work with other people like Owen and, great. So this is kind of segued into an appreciation for Jim Neidhart. But yes, Natty, we know you're watching. Please bring that back. And you don't have to say anything about it. Just do it in one match. We'll see it, and we'll know.
Yeah, we'll just know. We'll know that you watch this show. So on that note, let us know if there's any versions of the chokehold or the sleeper hold that we missed that you think that we should have mentioned, or maybe there was somebody that performed one of the moves we mentioned that we didn't name drop here. So please let us know in the comments what you think. If you'd rather listen to us, you can check us out on Apple Podcasts and or Spotify. For Leonard, my name is Chad. We will see you next week, and Alexa will see you out.